The world changed on March 15, 2064, when NovaGenix Labs announced their breakthrough. Dr. Vivian Kessler stood before a sea of reporters, holding up a small vial filled with iridescent liquid that seemed to capture and bend light in impossible ways. "Today," she declared, "we transcend the limitations of human potential." They called it Evolix, a genetic enhancement serum that could amplify human capabilities beyond their natural boundaries. The public demonstration that followed silenced even the skeptics. A volunteer whose cognitive processing speed increased tenfold, another whose physical strength quadrupled, and most dramatically, a young woman who demonstrated the first documented case of human telekinesis. What Dr. Kessler didn't announce that day was the price tag: 50 million credits per dose. When questioned about accessibility, NovaGenix's CEO, Sterling Hawthorne, simply smiled and said, "Excellence has always commanded a premium." That smile would haunt screens and nightmares for decades to come, becoming a symbol of the divide that would reshape humanity. Within months, the gap between enhanced and unenhanced began to widen exponentially. Enhanced children were completing college-level courses before their 10th birthdays. Enhanced athletes shattered every existing world record. Enhanced business people could process market trends with computer-like precision, amassing fortunes that dwarfed the already astronomical wealth of their parents. The legislation followed quickly, drafted by senators whose campaign coffers overflowed with NovaGenix money. The Enhancement Regulation Act of 2125 restricted Evolix administration to children under 2 years old, when the neural pathways were most adaptable, and limited each person to a single dose. The official reason was safety. The unofficial reason was control. Beckett Rains knew the truth behind those laws. Beck had spent the last 5 years cleaning the laboratories where that truth was buried. Every night, as he scrubbed floors and sanitized equipment in NovaGenix's Development Wing C, he saw the failed test subjects. Adults driven mad by multiple doses. Children whose enhanced abilities had burned out their nervous systems. The single-dose limit wasn't about safety. It was about maintaining predictability. Like most unenhanced workers, Beck had started at NovaGenix through their Community Integration Program, a euphemistic name for what amounted to indentured servitude. His parents, unable to pay their mounting medical debts, had enrolled him in the program at 18. The terms were simple: 10 years of service in exchange for debt forgiveness. What they didn't mention was how those 10 years had a way of stretching into 15, then 20, as new debts accumulated under the weight of survival. The world Beck cleaned was different from the world he lived in. During the day, he returned to Sector 17, one of the sprawling worker districts that surrounded NovaGenix's gleaming corporate city. Here, people lived in stack houses, modular apartments piled 20 stories high, their walls thin enough to hear every argument, every cry, every dream being crushed under the weight of survival. He had met Ilara in the company cafeteria, where unenhanced workers were served synthetic protein paste, while enhanced employees dined on real food imported from the few remaining unpolluted farming zones. She worked in data entry, manually inputting information that enhanced processors could analyze in seconds. Her smile had been the first real thing he'd seen in years of artificial lights and sterile corridors. They married in a civil ceremony, witnessed by other workers during their regulated 15-minute break. They dreamed small dreams, maybe saving enough for a slightly larger stackhouse unit, perhaps even a window that faced the sunrise instead of another concrete wall. But when Ilara became pregnant, those modest dreams collided with harsh reality. Beck's wife, Ilara, had worked in NovaGenix's data entry division until the pregnancy began affecting her productivity. Company policy was clear: Unenhanced workers showing any sign of decreased productivity were immediately terminated. No maternity leave, no exceptions. She found work at the synthetic food dispensary, standing 12 hours a day until her feet swelled and her back screamed. But it still wasn't enough to save for an Evolix dose. "Our baby deserves a chance," Ilara would say at night, her hand resting on her growing belly. "A real chance, not this half-life we're living." Beck would hold her close, not mentioning the plan already forming in his mind. During his night shifts, he had discovered something the enhanced scientists never noticed: patterns in their security protocols, gaps in their surveillance, moments when even the most sophisticated systems had to reset. 5 years of invisible labor had made him truly invisible to them. He also noticed something else: the way Evolix was stored, the precise temperature controls, the handling protocols. Knowledge gathered in fragments, pieced together like a puzzle during countless nights of cleaning around the edges of humanity's next evolution. The enhanced scientists never thought to guard their conversations around a mere custodian. They discussed storage temperatures, handling procedures, dosage calculations, all the pieces Beck would need, though they didn't know it yet. The pregnancy was difficult. The air in Sector 17 had too many particles. The synthetic food, too few nutrients. When complications arose in the 8th month, the hospital, if it could be called that, did what it could. They saved the baby. They couldn't save Ilara. Beck named him Kai, just as Ilara had wanted. In the sterile hospital room, holding his son while the machines wound down around his wife's still form, he made his decision. Kai wouldn't grow up in this world of divisions. He wouldn't clean floors, or dispense synthetic food, or live in the shadows of towers he could never enter. The plan took 3 months to execute. Beck memorized every security shift, every camera angle, every access code carelessly entered while he cleaned nearby. He learned the exact location of the Evolix storage unit, the placement of every sensor, the timing of every guard rotation. He studied the enhanced guards' routines, noting how they grew careless during shift changes, how their attention wavered during system resets. He also prepared for what would come after. He reached out to old friends, people he trusted from before NovaGenix had reshaped the world. Dr. Lenore Calloway, an enhanced physician who had never forgotten her unenhanced roots, agreed to help. And Sloan Mercer, his childhood friend, who had helped him survive after Ilara's death, promised to be ready when the time came. On the night he chose to act, a rare summer storm battered the city. Lightning interfered with the exterior sensors. Rain drummed against windows, and thunder masked the sound of his movements. Using maintenance codes he'd gathered over years, Beck accessed the facility's secondary storage unit. His hands shook as he removed 5 doses of Evolix, carefully placing them in a temperature-controlled case he'd stolen piece by piece over months. The alarms started as he reached the outer corridor. He ran through the rain-slicked streets of the worker district, the precious case clutched to his chest. Behind him, he could hear the whir of security drones, the heavy thump of armored vehicles. Each step took him further from the sterile world of NovaGenix and deeper into the maze of stack houses and shadow markets where he'd grown up. Dr. Calloway ran an underground clinic in Sector 12, hidden beneath a synthetic food processing plant. She didn't ask questions when Beck burst in, soaked and desperate. She understood what he wanted the moment she saw the case. 5 doses, she whispered, her eyes wide. Beck, no one has ever... Please, he begged. He's all I have left. He's everything Ilara and I dreamed of. Dr. Calloway's hands moved with practiced precision as she prepared for the procedure. Her enhanced mind rapidly calculated dosage intervals while she assembled equipment that would never be found in a licensed medical facility. She knew better than anyone why NovaGenix had instituted the single-dose limit. She had witnessed the catastrophic cellular degradation in early test subjects who had received multiple treatments. But she had also spent years conducting her own research in this underground clinic, treating enhanced and unenhanced alike, studying the intricate dance between Evolix and human biology. There was something NovaGenix had missed in their race to monetize human evolution. The key wasn't in limiting doses, but in preparing the body to adapt to them. "Beck," she said quietly, drawing up a fluorescent green solution into a syringe. "Before we administer the Evolix, we need to prepare Kai's system. I've developed a compound. I call it the buffer protocol. It creates a sort of cellular scaffold that helps the body integrate multiple enhancement sequences." She held up the syringe, its contents shimmering under the harsh clinic lights. "This is derived from stem cells and synthetic proteins. It will modify Kai's cellular structure, making it more receptive to multiple doses of Evolix without the typical neural degradation we see in multiple-dose subjects." Beck watched as she administered the buffer protocol, the green liquid disappearing into his son's tiny arm. For 30 tense minutes, they monitored Kai's vital signs as his cells began to change at the molecular level. Dr. Calloway's enhanced senses could detect the subtle shifts in his body chemistry, the way his cellular matrices were rebuilding themselves, creating microscopic chambers ready to house each dose of Evolix. "Now," she said, reaching for the first dose of the iridescent enhancement serum, "we begin. The doses need to be administered in precise intervals, exactly 7 minutes and 30 seconds apart. Each dose will bind to different aspects of his genetic structure, protected by the buffer protocol's scaffolding." As she worked, Dr. Calloway explained in whispers, "The first dose will establish the base enhancement template. The second strengthens his neural pathways. The third and fourth doses will amplify his physical and cognitive capabilities beyond what a single dose could achieve. And the fifth—" She paused, carefully administering another injection. "The fifth dose will act as a catalyst, linking all the enhancements into a stable matrix." Time seemed to stretch as they waited between each dose, monitoring Kai's responses. His tiny body glowed faintly from within, the buffer protocol's bioluminescent markers showing them that his system was successfully integrating each new dose. What would have caused devastating cellular breakdown in others was, in Kai, becoming something entirely new, something that even NovaGenix, with all their resources, had never achieved. "The buffer protocol will continue to adapt as he grows," Dr. Calloway explained as she administered the final dose. "It's not just protecting him from the negative effects of multiple doses, it's helping his body create entirely new biological structures to house these enhanced capabilities. He'll be able to control and develop his abilities naturally, without the limitations NovaGenix built into their regulated doses." She looked at Beck, her enhanced eyes picking up the subtle changes already beginning in Kai's genetic structure. "What you've stolen isn't just Evolix, Beck. With the buffer protocol, you've given your son something NovaGenix never intended: the freedom to evolve beyond their controlled boundaries." A monitor beeped softly, confirming stable vital signs. Dr. Calloway smiled, tears in her eyes. "He's accepted all 5 doses. The buffer protocol is holding. Kai will live, and he'll be more than they ever imagined possible." "If they find out," Dr. Calloway began. "They already know," Beck said, hearing the approaching vehicles. "Thank you for everything." A final goodbye, and both Beck and Kai were gone. Beck ran through the dying storm to Sector 23, where Sloan lived. They had grown up together in the stack houses, shared meals when food was scarce, dreamed of a better world before reality had ground those dreams to dust. She had helped him survive after Ilara's death, watching Kai when his shifts ran long. Sloane opened her door to find Beck soaked and trembling, holding Kai wrapped in a blanket. "They're coming for me," he said without preamble. "I did something that could change everything. But Kai needs to survive. He needs to grow up safe, hidden, until he's ready." Sloane took the baby without hesitation, understanding in her eyes. Beck pulled out an envelope, water-spotted but sealed. "When he's old enough to understand, give him this. Tell him—" His voice broke. "Tell him, I'm sorry. I couldn't be there to see the man he'll become. Tell him his mother would have been so proud." Through the window, they could see the distinctive black vehicles of NovaGenix security moving through the streets below. Search drones cast white beams through the rain, methodically sweeping each building. "I'll protect him with my life," Sloane promised, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. Beck kissed his son's forehead one last time. "Change the world, little one," he whispered. Then he was gone, running back into the night, leading the security forces away from the only hope he had left. Sloane stood in her darkened apartment, holding a sleeping baby and a letter that would one day explain everything. Outside, the storm was finally passing. Lightning flashed one last time, illuminating the NovaGenix tower that dominated the city's skyline, a gleaming monument to the power of evolution controlled, regulated, and sold to the highest bidder. But in her arms, she held a revolution wrapped in a blanket. A child with 5 doses of humanity's future flowing through his veins. A son whose father had just sacrificed everything to give him, and perhaps the world, a chance at real change. The sound of gunshots echoed in the distance, then silence. Sloane held Kai tighter, her tears falling into his soft hair. "Your father loved you," she whispered, "and someday you'll understand why he had to leave." Above the city, the clouds finally broke, revealing a sky where even the stars seemed divided, the bright ones visible through the pollution, the dim ones lost in the endless dark. But somewhere in that darkness, a new light was growing, its power yet unknown, its future waiting to be written.